In this part of the tutorial, we're going to be looking at actually registering our users and creating our register.php file. Now, there's a few things we need to do before we start this. We need to take into account session data and also output buffering. So the first thing I'm going to do is start output buffering on the top. Now, this might not be required, but it's going to allow us to use headers after output. Although it's not recommended, we might come into the situation where we'll need to do this. So if you're unsure what OB start does exactly, go ahead to the PHP manual and take a look. Now the next thing is extremely important, and that's to start our sessions. Now remember, init.php is going to be included at the top of every page. So these are the first two lines that are going to be run. OB start and then session start. Session start is going to need to come before any output as well. So ensure that this is at the very top of this page. Now the next thing we want to do is obviously connect to our database, obviously so we can access data that we've looked at in the last part and actually insert retrieve data. So we're going to go ahead and use the MySQL connect function, and this takes three parameters. The first one is the server, which in my case is localhost, which almost always is. My username is root and my password is blank because I don't have one set. We're then going to go ahead and select a database, so we're going to use the MySQL select DB function, and I'm choosing the database Visual Upload. That's because I named it Visual Upload in PHPMyAdmin, so that's the MySQL database. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're ready to actually start to look at inserting our registration data into the database and registering our users. Let's just go ahead to our page and refresh to see if we don't get any errors. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is go ahead and create the register.php file. So I'm going to go ahead, create a new file and save this as register.php. Okay, now when we click on register up here, we're taken to this blank page that we've created. Now the first thing we obviously want to do is include init.php, and this is going to give us access to our database as well as our starting session and all of our functions as well. So the next thing to do is to include the header template. So we include template /header.php. We come down a couple of lines and we include template /footer.php. Now anything that goes in here is going to be displayed within our template design. So just as an example, we can cut that off there and cut that off there, and we can enter HTML data here. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that and refresh, and you can see that we've got our same design that we've been using, and then the output just in the content area. Okay, so what do we need in our content area? Obviously we want to allow our user to register, so let's go ahead and create some header 3 tags and type register in there. And we're going to go ahead and create a form, which is obviously the form that the user is going to be filling out. The action is going to be blank because we're posting it to the same page, and the method is going to be post because we're using post data. We'll end the form there and continue with the form. Okay, so inside paragraph tags, the first field we want to take in is the user's email address. So we create an input type, and again that's email because we're using HTML5. The name of this is going to be equal to register email, and the size is going to be equal to 35, and we're going to have a max length of 255. Now remember, this 255 value corresponds to what we have in our database stored under our users field. Just here we've got 255, and we will have checks in place to check that this isn't longer than 255. If it is longer than 255, the problem is going to be that the data is going to be cut off at the end. So let's go ahead and create some more paragraph tags, and in here we want to take the user's full name. So we're going to say full name, and we're going to say input type equals text. The name of this field is going to be register_name. We're going to have a max length of 35. Okay, so that just again corresponds to the value in the database. Let's go ahead and create the password field. So password. The input type is password. The name is register_password. So So I'm sensibly naming the form field variable names, and the max length is going to be 35. Now I know this corresponds to 32 in the database, however, like I've said, we're going to be encrypting this value and it will always end up at 32. So we can go ahead and create our submit button to actually allow the user to submit the form. So input type submit, and the value is just equal to register. So we're going to have a button labeled register. Let's go back over to our page and refresh and see what we have. Okay, so we've got email, full name and password. Let's just tidy this up with a few line breaks. Okay, so now when we come back, we have this nice form here. So the user can now enter an email, a full name and a password. When we click register, we're going to complete some validation and then we're going to actually register the user. So we're actually going to be completing the user register function after we've completed the validation. So it's extremely important to actually sanitize the data before we insert it into our database. So I'm going to come just under this tag and open some PHP tags, and this is where we're going to be checking everything that the user's typed into the form. So the first thing we need to do is check if these variables are set, and then if they are, we can run a block of code. So the first one is $_post, and then in brackets, square brackets, and single quotation marks, register_email. So that's register email there. Now isSet takes multiple parameters, so we can just use a comma and say $_post. Again, we're accessing posted data here, and that's register_name. Again, another comma, $_post, and in here register_password. So now if that happens, we can just say OK for now, just for debugging purposes. So if everything has been set, i.e. has the register button been clicked, we'll just echo out OK, and then we can get an idea of how our form works. Let's go ahead and just click register, and you can see we've got OK up here. So we know everything in this block happens once the user's clicked the register button. Now we're going to assign these posted variables here to variables in PHP. So I'm going to create a new variable called register email, and that's going to be equal to $_post register_email, and we're going to do the same thing for all of these. So register name and register password. We also want to go ahead and change these, that's extremely important. Password. Okay, so now we've stored these in variables that we can more easily reference inside of this block, instead of having to keep type $_post and then the variable name. Now, one thing to note is I'm not using MySQL real escape string function on these, because our let's go ahead to our user function page. User register is going to deal with this. We're going to sanitize the data in here with regards to SQL injection. So we're not sanitizing this data just yet. We're validating, and then once we pass these variables to user register, we're going to protect against SQL injection. So I'm going to come down, and my method of validation is storing all errors inside an array and then checking this array is empty. There is another PHP Academy tutorial on this kind of validation, so if you're unsure of this, you can go ahead and check that video out. I'm going to create a variable called errors, and that's just going to be equal to an array. And then I'm going to come down and we're going to start checking our errors. The first check is if the data is empty. You saw when we clicked register before, we got this OK back. However, that didn't mean that all the fields had actually been filled out. So we need to check if the data has actually something, the fields have something typed in it. So I'm going to say if empty register email, or, so I'm using the or operator here, empty register name, and again, or empty register password. So if any of these fields are empty, we want to go ahead and say errors, and our brackets, we're adding an element to this errors array, so we're inserting an element as an error, and we can say errors equals all fields required. Okay, now our else block is going to contain some more checks, and the first one is the email validation. We need to validate the email address. Now let's go ahead now and just press or type in OK here into well, we're echoing out OK. So if we go ahead and refresh this page and click register, oh, actually nothing's going to happen at the moment. Let's just go ahead and print our errors, and print R is just going to give us our array output so we can see what's happening.